I'm Tiziana Dearing, host of Radio Boston, and I want to thank all three of you, Ellice, Stephanie, Brennan, for being here for our conversation now. So much for us to talk about, and I'd like to remind you in the audience that you can participate in the conversation. You go to slido.com, and you can type in arts, and you can send your questions in, and we'll work to incorporate some of those questions throughout our panel conversation now. I think I'd like to start by asking each of you, did you see or hear something tonight in each other's performances or in the performances you saw that was new to you? A concept that was new to you, a way to perform that was new to you, something new or different, or something that you'd like to reflect on and the performances that you saw. Brennan, I'll start with you down on the end.
Okay, so I thought Ellice's audio descriptions during the dance, not only did it make the performance accessible for those who are blind, low vision, but it also was so artistic at the same time. So I think that's like a perfect example of how we can meld accessibility and artistic merit and like use disability to be artistic. That's a shining example, so I'd like to give her a round of applause.
Since I'm close to cost of living, I won't speak on that, but with Ellice's performance, it was interesting the extension of the crutches is sort of aiding in not only helping you, but being so artistic with their use. It was very, it was beautiful.
Ellice, how about for you?
Yeah, I also had the privilege of seeing Cost of Living in theater and love your set, by the way. It is great. I'm just always fascinated by set design. But within the work itself, I think just the dynamic of the boundaries between those who are in caregiving roles and folks who are disabled, I think should be talked about enough, especially when you already have a personal connection versus this is your work. And I think just having those conversations and thinking about that for myself was definitely something that I'm still ruminating on, for sure.
So let's pick up from there. And as I ask a question, I would encourage, I'll direct it to one of you, but feel free to jump in. If something one of you says triggers something for another, just jump on in. The more free for all, the better, I think, in the whole conversation. Stephanie,
Yes.
So in Cost of Living, you are in one of the pair of stories.
Correct.
That's told in this Pulitzer Prize-winning play. And in your case, a couple that is divorcing, but then there's a car accident, and the couple finds itself in a different dynamic.
Yeah, they're sort of at a stalemate, and it's interesting because we talked ad nauseum about their relationship before the accident and where their relationship is post-accident and how that sort of impacts everything. And she's sort of grappling with the fact that she wants to be so independent, and she was before this, but now she can't. She can't literally afford it. She can't afford it physically. She needs that help from her estranged husband, and how does that change their relationship, and does it strengthen it, or does it weaken it, or what happens? And if you haven't seen the show...
Spoiler alert.
Well, no, just it's something to find out.
So, and I'll stay with you for a minute longer.
Sure.
And ask you, not having, I would argue I've never acted, but not having been in a play
Right.
since high school or college, the idea of entering into that space as a performer and thinking about that level of both intimacy and pain and frustration, what was it like for you to manifest that character and that relationship?
I I use my own relationship with my body and my own disability. I have cerebral palsy, and I use the stiffness of my own body and the sort of sense memory of when I was 13, I had to learn to walk again. It took about 2 years. I wrote a solo show about it. I named my wheelchair Leonardo DiCaprio so I could sit in his lap. And so I'm using my physical being to inform a character that is far away from me a little bit, because I have mobility to an extent. I don't have any signifiers that say I have a disability, so it's different. But Ani is she's mad, she's bitter, she's mourning a life that she had previously. And I think it says something about disability as well. I think oftentimes people don't think of the disabled community as a minority group that anybody can be a part of at any time, at any age, whatever. You can become a member of the disability community for any reason. And just sort of, how do you compartmentalize your past with your present, and how do you look towards the future, and what you want your life to be as a disabled person. And she has so much heart with her. She loves Eddie so much, but she's grappling with the fact that her life is never going to be the same. I hope, yeah.
Thank you. Actually, it was a lovely answer. Thank you.
I'm long-winded sometimes.
So, Brennan, I'll come down to you and sort of thinking about this space where we're talking about disability in the arts. One of the questions that came up for me as I was preparing for this, and thinking about how would I ask this question both of the Google and the person, right? As I'm thinking about this, is progress in the world of arts with both representation, shows, performances, content. And then I thought, okay, but what's my definition of progress, and is that the right definition of progress? So it's the first part of the question is, in your lifetime, lots of progress, a little progress, how would you characterize
I
it?
think that's a really complex question, just like disability is complex and a spectrum. Yes and no, all at the same time. We certainly see a lot more representation than when I was 5 years old and had no representation, had no role models to know that I could be or achieve anything, right? No expectation. But yet, I still find in many artistic spaces that we are still monitoring who we can see based upon what is palatable for the audience. And not every disabled person is going to be that palatable for the audience, Sometimes it's going to be uncomfortable. Sometimes we're going to have to look, even when we don't want to. So my goal as a producer is to really work to not gatekeep who we are seeing, because disability is a spectrum from me to Sean to Stephanie and way beyond. But we're not really ever seeing those people that people might deem too disabled to be seen in a medium or too uncomfortable to look at. But those people have value too, of course. And it's just really my goal to say, we need to see everyone.
Go ahead, Stephanie.
When I will say, when I was growing up, the person that I saw on TV was Jerry Jewell on The Facts of Life. And she had cerebral palsy as well. And also the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, didn't exist until I was 6 years old. So my parents really had to fight for even the most basic, accessible things. And when I was younger, I was a lot less mobile. I had a lot of surgeries. I had crutches and casts and all these different things. So it was a lot different when I was a kid as compared to now. Now we're sort of making strides as a society, hopefully. But I even look at things like, if you look at the curb and you look at like the ramp to get up to the curb, and people don't shovel it to shovel the snow, and then if you're in a wheelchair or on crutches or whatever, you can't get up there. It's not accessible anymore because someone just thought it doesn't need to be, you know. I personally need like handrails and stuff when I go up and down stairs. So even something as simple as like 3 steps, I'm like, I need a railing. I need to find something to hang on to or I'll fall. These are things that people don't necessarily think about unless you've lived it. Yeah. And it's sort of disappointing. But then again, I've always had to navigate a world that wasn't built for me, you know, even as a relatively mobile, disabled person. I'm relatively ambulatory. However, we're born into a world that we aren't seen in.
Let's bring you in here, Ellice, and I'll invite you to answer the first part of the question if you want, and then pull in that second part as well, which is, what is the definition of progress? And are we missing a piece of that definition of progress?
Yeah, I would say my experience is a bit different because I was not born disabled. My disability was acquired a bit later. And so navigating kind of pre-disability and then after, and realizing, as you mentioned, like it's one of those things you don't think about unless you're in it. And so having to then kind of get in it, and then especially in a dance sense, and figuring out, well, dance isn't for me, so let me leave, because I wasn't seeing the representation until later. And then building community again, I think it's one of those things that there has been progress, and there are companies like ours, but not enough, or not enough companies that are willingly accepting, or even shows that are as accessible as they should be to bring in both artists and audiences. And so progress has been made, but can be more, as you mentioned, and will continue to be made as we keep hosting spaces like this and keep prioritizing putting disabled works, not just with disabled artists, but with disabled producers and disabled directors and a whole team of folks who really understand and embody the work.
One of our audience members, and again, you can ask a question by going to slido.com and entering the word arts. One of our audience members wanted to ask, what is one inclusive layer that you wish was non-negotiable in the arts? And Ellice, I'll stay here with you first, and then we'll go down the line.
Just one.
Hey, if you got a couple,
I have a list.
Bring them to the table.
But in short, I feel as though there should just be some base layers that are a part of every show every time, not just like one night of ASL or one night of audio descriptions, but that it should be as long as the show runs, and that there should be accessible theaters, not just for the audience, but for the artist as well. And that there should also be warnings too for any inaccessible features like flashing lights that are in the show, or other elements that can make folks make wise decisions before entering a venue.
What else, Brennan?
Piggybacking off what Ellice said, I think it's really important that we, again, accessibility should be an everyday thing. So like our friends who are hard of hearing and the deaf community, they shouldn't have to pick between 2 performances. as a wheelchair user, I shouldn't have to worry if someone already bought like one of the 2 accessible seats in the theater for me to go with my friend to see the show. We should have seats that can come out so we can have 15 people in chairs at a show and not just like 3. You know what I mean? And then beyond that, just recognizing that, 1 in 4 Americans, according to the CDC, identify with having a disability. That's quite a large number of our population. But yet we are, like I said in the essay for the SpeakEasy program, we're often so left in the shadows, our stories too. So I think, and disabled people are everywhere, in every way. So we need to really be represented in the shows, in the ensemble, as the chorus. Like, being the lead is great, but we are also part of community. No, I'm serious. We're part of community, so I'd like to see more people with disabilities in ensembles of shows and in smaller parts, and yeah.
So that presence in all parts of the story,
Yes.
Stephanie, that Brennan's talking about is really interesting to me. And one of the questions from the audience was how many theatrical roles are accessible to those with disabilities? What are the basic barriers to entry in the U.S.? And I wonder about that from a writing standpoint, an imagination standpoint, as well as all the other ways that could play out. Stephanie, yeah.
I, speaking from personal experience, I just got my master's in English and creative writing, right? And I'm specifically writing things that deal with the disability community, because if people don't write it, then how do you know it exists? You know what I mean? And trying to bring an authentic voice to that experience. And I think the thing that Martina did really well with Cost of Living is she brought her lived experience of being a caretaker to the show. And I think it's really important, especially the stipulation in her script, to have disabled actors play Ani and John, because it gives us. A friend of mine had said, "This is our Hamlet," sort of, because nobody has sort of set those parameters before, and it's really special when we get something that's for us. Does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah.
So, Brennan, go.
If I may add from
Yes.
a producer's perspective, I think a lot of people are worried about cost of accommodation. And if they are, come talk to me, because we can work it out. No, I'm serious. Accommodations cost money. And this is show business, show being the adjective. No, like literally that is a big layer that is preventing.
So how do we work on that?
I think showing investors, people with the money, that it is worth it to put your money in disabled stories and there will be profit. You can profit off disabled people in our stories. But no, because that's ultimately what they care about. I'm not going to lie to you, right? And in my experience, that is people's number one excuse as to why they won't. And I'm like, but let me show you how we budget these things. Mm-hmm. Let me show you, even like a ultra low budget project. There are ways to make accessibility on a shoestring budget. I've been doing it for years, So I really, if you have enough gumption, think you can pull it off. But I know from experience and talking to other producers and stuff in the industry, that is often people's excuse, and also spaces being accessible. Speaking to like Broadway theaters and stuff, there's so little accessibility backstage, even at the most modern of theaters. So it's on theater owners, right? I'm looking at you, theater owners, that we need to be making our spaces accessible. We need to be talking to the government
Yeah.
because the arts are such a revenue for people. And if we as a culture start saying, like, we won't patronize unless we see everyone represented, like, we won't come, we won't spend our money, then maybe, like, change will happen. But until then, we have to have gumption and make it work.
Stephanie, you want to say one more thing about that before I come to Ellice with a new question?
Sure.
Oh, I can also add on to that.
Oh, yeah, great. Look, bring it on down the line. Here we go.
Okay. I will say that I was doing an off-Broadway show, and there was a spiral metal staircase that went down to a dressing room. And the producers said to the space, they were like, that can't be Stephanie's dressing room. We need to have her on stage level, because I was like, I literally can't do that. A quote unquote normal person would find it difficult to go down this weird, I was like, how is this, whatever. And I was grateful that they spoke up before I had to advocate for myself. I've always had to advocate for, hey guys, I need this, or I need this, And I'm just grateful that now there are people in my life who are like, she needs this,
And you don't have to do it yourself, Mrs.
Thank God. I still advocate for myself every day. However, now that I have that backing and I feel safe to do so, it's a great feeling, because I didn't always feel that way in my career. I've been doing this professionally for 25 years, and I only recently, in the past decade, have been sort of feeling supported as a disabled artist.
Ellice, add on.
Yeah, I was going to add more of just the accommodations cost, and we can't, which is ridiculous because everything costs. And as you mentioned, as a business in creating the shows, lights cost, cameras cost, like all of these elements cost. And so if it's not in the line items, like at the very beginning, like that shows us priority right then and there of what you prioritize for your access needs for your artist, et cetera. And so having that baked in every time is going to make a world of difference in creating the access needed for artists and for audiences as well.
Have you begun to encounter places that are starting to bake it in? Have you come across any place that has baked it in?
We're getting there. Yeah, there definitely are spaces that are getting more and more into having some elements, whether we went with no ASL to now we have one ASL night, or, a couple. I think theaters, other performance arts orgs are slowly starting to come with it, but also, as mentioned too, like you can still have access on a shoestring things, like the audio descriptions mentioned, like I wrote those. I recorded it on my $40 Amazon camera and then put it over the music. Like it doesn't have to be this like high tech, like so disconnected from what you need type of thing, as long as there is, some core components and good intentions and folks to test things off of to make sure that it is of use to the community, which was why we also have an editor, Amber, who identifies as blind, to make sure they are of use to the community. Then that's how we can keep things going and grow the access from there.
So I want to stay with you for a second, Ellice, and to a point that Brennan made at the very beginning of our conversation, talking about how great your descriptions were. And during the dance, as I was enjoying them, I was thinking, well, I get to actually enjoy two forms of art from you, because not only your dance, but also you're funny. Right? It's smart, it's funny. I'm enjoying satire and social commentary as well as the dance form of that. And what it got me to thinking of is, in our work, we know that when you encounter people's stories and all of who they are, it stretches what you understand about the world. You discover new facets of things that you thought you knew. And it feels to me like there is a translation here that the theater community needs to understand better, that the more we see stories, the better stories we tell, period. I didn't really mean to make that just a statement, maybe. Brennan.
That's good.
Well, can I add another?
Yes.
Because there's
Yes.
also another element of music as well that helps. Our director of music, Andrew Tro, created the original score for both of those pieces. And so there's also the music that is originally created with these stories and movements that is developed alongside as the process goes on, so that it is this kind of multimedia art. And we both identify as disabled as well. So it is truly written and created by the community and for the community.
Fantastic. Brennan, add on.
Yeah, I had some stuff to add off the back of what both of these terrific people have been saying. So Stephanie talked about like advocating for accommodations for herself. As a producer, I think that's like my greatest sense of pride, that the disabled people that I know, that I can take care of them, and so they don't have to do that. They don't have to have those conversations with people. Like, I am unfiltered. I don't really care. And I will have those difficult conversations. And yes, we will be accessible and we will be equitable and everyone will feel value, you know? Because it's like the little things, it's the little considerations that I think really matter sometimes. And so I'm not saying I speak for every disabled person, because let me tell you, I don't. But I think I can bring my 32 years of experience forward and, you know, make sure my people are covered, and that really brings me a lot of joy. Yeah.
Yeah.
So-
I was just also going to add to you on that note of producing and directing and being that voice for artists so that they don't have to be the voice for themselves is in creating space, because we have a number of folks that identify as disabled with a number of identities in that space, and trying to create space for everyone is definitely its moments, and there can definitely be access needs that conflict with each other, but it's not perfect all the time, but there are some core things that exist for everyone. And in advocating too, there have been spaces in which we have been disrespected and where folks have just not been appreciative of the most marginalized of us, and that we've had to leave, and saying that it is okay and we will not be back here, because I respect the work that these folks do and want to always make sure that I can create as safe a place as possible while they get to just focus on doing the dope work that they do.
Yeah.
We have another question from the audience. How does television and film compare to live theater and representation? What's your report card for the performing arts, Stephanie?
So 2% of speaking roles on, it's the Rudderman Foundation, I believe. 2% of speaking roles on TV and film are played by disabled actors, and that doesn't include disabled characters being played by anybody. That includes just disabled actors, and it's 2%, and it's sort of abysmal. It needs to change. I know so many talented disabled actors with varying disabilities who can absolutely play an array of characters. They can play the lawyer, the teacher, the boyfriend, you know, the girlfriend, the whatever it is, if you just give us a chance. In casting notices, oftentimes you're sort of pigeonholed to the disabled one. However, I've been fortunate enough to be cast in things that didn't stipulate a disability. And that's great, and that needs to happen more often. Because we can play anything, it doesn't matter. And I think that once people see more representation on TV and film, then there'll be more sort of, I don't know if willing is the right word, but there'll be more open to accepting anybody. But you have to see it first. I think it comes with the out of sight, out of mind type of adage, where if you don't see it, Does it exist? Yes, it does, but you need to see it first. You really do.
Brendan?
So to that point, I also want to give a shout out to a colleague of mine. Her name is Danielle Pretzfelder-Demchek, and she's Vice President of the Casting Society of America Equity and Inclusion Committee, and she is a disability advocate herself, although she is not disabled. And her work at her casting office, DPD Casting, really focuses on spotlighting disability in television and film especially. And she has really, I have to give her so much credit with how much she has stuck her neck out over the past decade for disabled people and really teaching other casting directors, you know, it is possible to cast a disabled person in any role. And we really need to expand our view because, in my opinion, disability is the most underrepresented community in our media. Yeah, we're just not seeing it, and we're not also seeing that disability there is diversity within disability. I'm Asian American. There are Black people who are disabled. There are people of every walk. No, but people don't think about the intersectionality of disability. That's what I'm trying to say. Disability is so intersectional, and again, if we mind people's intersections, then we can make art in addition to what we were, you know what I mean?
Yes.
Because it just adds more layers and richness and ingenuity.
Is there, for each of you, a dream story you'd like to tell through your art? Ellice?
I tell it all the time. So, I mean, the beauty of being able to write the shows that I do is just what a dream is created. But I think with our recurring series Intersections, which is actually, the next one's April 19th and 20th, it is literally talking about the intersections of race and disability and honoring BIPOC and disabled honorees past and present and kind of taking their life arcs and translating that to music and movement and then connecting it to bills that are currently on the state floor as another form of advocacy. And I think that this is our third year doing that, and with all the different honorees and just all of the things that I have learned through all of these folks' experiences and that others have learned that we've been able to kind of put on stage, that I'm continuing to unlearn my own internalized ableism, because we all have internalized ableism, and continuing to figure out my space and community even 12 plus years now. So,
Stephanie, how about you?
Well, right now, I mean, doing cost of living has been a literal dream of mine. My connection to the play goes back to 2016.
First year it was staged, yes?
Stage, yes.
Yeah.
And I had been wanting to play Ani for so long. So the dream is happening at the moment. But in addition to that, I wrote a feature film for my master's thesis that I incorporate disability into in varying different ways: physical, mental, and emotional. And my goal, hopefully in the next maybe 5-10 years, is to get the film made, because I think it's important for disabled writers and actors to tell stories that are meaningful to them, but also spread a message. I don't know, not necessarily preachy, but like, you know what I mean? Telling their story and telling good stories, because we have good stories to tell. We have very vivid, lived experiences that are really unique. And no disabled person has the same story. Even if you have the same disability, you never have the same story.
How about you, Brennan?
So let me just make sure I'm understanding the question. Can you repeat yourself?
Is there a story that you dream of producing or telling one day?
I don't know if there's a specific story that I dream of telling, but I definitely just want to see more representation of all kinds, like, but I don't know if I have a specific story, but like something that brings me real joy currently as a producer
Yeah.
is, so I founded a nonprofit program called Disabled Down Center, which spotlights disability and entertainment through performance, special events, and a virtual masterclass series. And I think out of the like three-prong approach we have, I'm most proud of this masterclass series because not only is it free, it's for non-disabled and disabled performers alike, and we have people who come from all over the world on Zoom to convene about disability art and learn about auditioning and stuff. And people have made like friends, and we've created allies, which, let's be honest, there are more people who aren't disabled in this world than there are who are. So we need allies. We need people who will stand up and say, you know what, we won't accept the status quo.
So let's finish there, and we'll come right back down this way. Brennan, you've already done this once, but give a shout to somebody. Who would you like to shout out?
Oh, I guess I'll shout out my mom. I gotta be honest with you, my mom is my role model when it comes to inclusion, especially disability inclusion. She was my advocate, and she really taught me from a young age that inclusion is about everyone. And if we're not talking about everyone, then we're not being inclusive. And I was just talking to my best friend today, saying like, it feels so good to me to like come to these spaces and say, primarily, I'm just a disability advocate. And like through my childhood and through my 20s, I didn't really want to talk about it. And like now, it's all I want to talk about. Like, I hope people know me as the guy that won't shut up about disability. Really.
What's your mom's name?
My mom's name is Trina.
There we go.
Thank you.
Yeah, Stephanie.
I want to shout out Alex Lenati and everybody at SpeakEasy because I think they're doing important work, especially for the disabled community right now, and really taking the time and making the effort to make sure that everybody in the cast, but especially Sean and myself, are cared for and appreciated and looked after on stage and off, and making sure that we're comfortable and put our worries aside and know that everything's taken care of. We don't have to sort of think about getting from A, B, and C because it's all been taken care of. It's all been thought of before. And the things that I would normally ask about have already been thought of, which is great. And I also want to shout out my mother as well, because my mom and my dad really did a lot when I was a kid. And Children's Hospital. So my mother, my mom, my dad, Children's Hospital. Those are the three.
Do you want to tell us your parents' names?
Linda and Stephen Gould.
There we go.
Yeah.
Ellice.
Yeah, I would like to shout out these dancers here that did a really amazing job. And that they and the rest of the dancers in the company, really, it is a collaborative effort to work together to not just make the movements fit for them and their bodies, but also for their identities and what they're bringing into the conversation of whatever the theme is that we're working on, as well as Andrew, who is my artistic collaborator, who supports in building not just the incredible music that you hear, which is genius, but also in just being able to be a true connection in this work and to be able to lean on them too when it's just like, hey, do you need an access moment? I got things here. And then let me have the space I need to be what I need to do too. So thank you.
Well, I want to thank all three of you for joining us this evening.
Thank you for
Both
having
Thank
us.
you so much.
performance and conversation.